What's going on, guys? Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 354 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. I don't have my Batman mask on today because I'm not talking about a Batman book. The very beginning of this year, when I first started this challenge, I opened with a week of books featuring characters that originated in DC's Earth 2. Characters like Dr. Midnight, Power Girl, Infinity Inc., characters who in some way have a connection to Earth 2. And I thought it would be cool to close out the year talking about characters and stories surrounding Earth 2. So starting today, I'm going to be talking about a whole bunch of Earth 2 stuff. So today, I want to talk about Earth 2, Volume 1, The Gathering, by James Robinson and Nicholas Scott. This is a tie-in to the Highlander franchise. That's why it's called The Gathering. I'm just kidding. This is actually a revamp of DC's old Justice Society characters. It's kind of taking it back to the idea that they exist on a separate Earth from, I guess, what you could call DC's big guns, like Superman, Batman. Back in the day, you had characters, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and they were pretty much as you know them. And then you had characters like the Flash, Green Lantern, Hawkman, the Atom, except they weren't the versions of those characters that you're familiar with. Green Lantern was not a member of the Green Lantern Corps. He was just some dude who found a magic meteor and he carved a ring and a lantern out of the meteor and then used it to fight crime. The Flash was not Barry Allen, it was Jay Garrick, etc. They were the same identities and same power sets that you're familiar with, but they had different circumstances surrounding how they got those powers, different identities than what came later, like in the mid-50s and the early 60s with the Silver Age. And this is basically restoring the idea that these characters live on a separate Earth from, I guess you could say, the main Green Lantern and the main Flash, etc. And I really like this quite a bit. Whenever it was first being teased and first being announced, I really wasn't sure what I was going to think of this. One of my favorite things about the previous version of the Justice Society, the David Goyer, Jeff Johns version that started in the late 90s and went on until like the late 2010 or so. It went on for quite a while. What I really like about that version of the Justice Society was the legacy aspect, was that you had these older characters who had been around since World War II, and some of them were still around thanks to magic and alternate realities where time moves slower and stuff like that. But then you had second and third generation superheroes who were connected to those older characters, and then you had the chance to see these characters interacting and bringing different, I guess, a different view to how they could work together as a team. Ted Grant, Wildcat, he fought crime very differently than Jakeem Thunder, for example. And so I really like that legacy aspect and that generational aspect to that series. That was one of my favorite aspects, not only of that series, but the Justice Society in a post-Crisis on Infinite Earths world. I really liked that anytime you wanted to, you could have Wally West go and ask Jay Garrick for advice, and then you had that almost grandfatherly aspect to those characters. And that is lost here, but I don't mind, because James Robinson and Nicholas Scott, they are able to completely reinvent these characters, and in some ways, I think that they're making improvements on these characters. For example, Alan Scott is a character I don't really care about. I don't have any strong feelings about him one way or another. I like that he has a couple of kids who are in Infinity Inc. I like his parental relationship that he has with them. It's kind of strained because he didn't even know they existed until they were teenagers. I like his relationship that he has with Jade and Obsidian. That is gone here because Alan Scott here is probably in his, I would say, mid-30s. Not quite old enough. I guess he could have had kids when he was in his early 20s, but he is not a parent here. In fact, he's gay, and then that is part of the redesign of these characters. I remember a lot of people were really throwing a fit, like, you can't make Alan Scott gay. What about Obsidian and Jade? Well, even if they made him straight in this story, you still wouldn't have Obsidian and Jade because they're de-aging all these characters. They're not veteran superheroes who have been active for 15 or 20 years. They're all new at this. All of them here, except for a couple of characters, they get their origins in this book. And that is one thing that may not work for some people. This entire volume feels like it's set up for the rest of the series and this entire world. That doesn't bother me, but I could see it bothering other other people. Basically, the premise here, and I will say the cover is very misleading. Right here you see Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman with redesigned costumes. Wonder Woman's costume doesn't look too different, but Superman's costume looks a little different. Batman's costume looks a little different. You might see this and you might think, oh cool, they're taking the Justice Society back to their pre-Crisis on Infinite Earths roots, and you're going to have an older Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman here working together with Green Lantern, Flash, Hawkgirl. No, that's not happening here. Spoilers for this book, but Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman die in the first issue, and then the rest of this book is setting up a new generation of Wonders, as they're called here. Instead of metahumans or superheroes, they're just called Wonders. And so the Roman god of speed, Mercury, he gives speed powers to Jay Garrick, and I thought that was really cool because Jay Garrick traditionally has a helmet very much like what Mercury wears in depictions of the Roman god of speed. I thought that was kind of cool. And also here, instead of Diana, Wonder Woman, being a child of the Greek gods, she's a child of the Roman gods, because way back in the 1940s when William Moulton Marston was creating Wonder Woman, he kind of mixed and matched. He would have some Greek god stuff there, but then he would also have Diana fighting Mars, the Roman god of war. And so it almost seemed like he wasn't as up on his mythological stuff when he was doing Wonder Woman, but here they just go all the way. They say that Diana is a Roman character instead of a Greek character, and then that forges a little bit of a connection there whenever Mercury comes and talks to her right before she dies. He says that he now has faith in man, and then that leads to him giving powers to Jay Garrick. I thought that was really cool. Alan Scott's power is very different here. He doesn't actually have a lantern that he can charge his ring on. His powers are more connected to the earth, which is kind of cool, and also provides a connection here with the villain of this piece, who is Solomon Grundy. And Solomon Grundy is very different than how you usually see him. I don't actually care about this version of Solomon Grundy that much. I think they could have just had a scary-looking zombie skeleton man and not called him Solomon Grundy, and I would have been fine with that. But I think they were trying to make all these little joke references to characters and concepts that we are familiar with, and so they said, hey, look, it's Solomon Grundy, even though this is not the Solomon Grundy that I know and love. And yes, that's true for a lot of these characters. This version of Jay Garrick is very different than the Jay Garrick I know and love. Same with Alan Scott and Al Pratt. All these characters are very different than the ones that you're familiar with. Although, I'm going to be honest, I don't think there are any Al Pratt fans out there. Terry Sloan, the original Mr. Terrific, I don't think there are any Mr. Terrific fans out there. But Terry Sloan is in this book. He is a psychopath and probably a supervillain. At one point, one of the government guys says that he wiped out like 2/3 of Pakistan. So he is very much a dangerous supervillain type here, and not the fair play superhero that you're familiar with from the original Justice Society. And that's a thing. If you are a huge fan of the Justice Society, you may not like this book because it does take some liberties with some of these characters, like I've already talked about. For me, even though I do like the Justice Society, and there are things about the original pre-New 52 Justice Society that I like quite a bit, I also like quite a bit about this. So I think that it works. It does take some liberties, but for the most part, it doesn't bother me. The only one that I really could just say, no, you don't have to do that, is Solomon Grundy. And I like the idea of the gray and the green being opposing aspects, the green being how Alan Scott got his powers, and the gray being the entity that gives Solomon Grundy his powers. I like that idea. I just didn't have to have this character calling himself Grundy for some reason. It's never really explained why he's calling himself Grundy, but that's okay. Basically, this book, in a lot of ways, it kind of reminds me of the TV show Heroes, where you're introduced to a whole bunch of characters who are all getting their powers around the same time, and they're trying to figure out how they want to use these powers, and they're working together to fight a common enemy, but spoilers, they don't actually permanently band together in this book, and I think that's really cool. We very easily could have had our main characters all say, yeah, we make a good team, let's work together from now on. That's usually how an origin story would work for a superhero team. I like that they don't do that here because it gives us more opportunities to pair characters together in different, unusual ways. Alan Scott, he's telling Hawkgirl and the Flash, he says, I don't need you guys, I'm so powerful, I can do all this by myself. And so now we can see him go off and meet, I don't know, this world's version of the Red Tornado, or Citizen Steel, I think is what they call him. They mentioned Citizen Steel here, but we don't actually get to see him. So we can have Alan Scott go off and do that, while Hawkgirl and Flash, they go off and do their own thing. And it allows for different team-ups that you wouldn't get to see if all these characters decide, yeah, we're going to have our own team starting now. I kind of like that, and we will get to see them working together, but they're not calling themselves, we are now the Justice Society, or anything like that. And I think that's good. It works on a story level that a lot of times you don't see in superhero comics. So I really like this book quite a bit. It's one of my favorite things from the New 52. It's not going to be for everybody, but it is for me. I like it quite a bit. The one thing about this that I was a little unsure about is that this is set in the aftermath of a war with Apocalypse, Darkseid, and his forces. And in fact, the first issue, you get to see Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman dying in that war. And by the way, I think it's really cool that Power Girl and Huntress were originally the Earth 2 versions of Supergirl and Robin. Power Girl has always kind of sort of been connected with Supergirl, but her origins have been really wonky and sketchy over the years, very confusing. Nobody really knows what to do with Power Girl, and I'm glad in the New 52 they finally said, screw it, she is the cousin of an alternate reality Superman. I think that works great for her. It's simple, it's easy to understand, and I like that she was actually Supergirl here. And then we get to see her and Huntress get sucked into a portal that presumably leads to the main DC Earth, and then we will get to see them team up in the World's Finest series, which I have not read, but I would like to read it and see if it's as good as this series. But I think it is a stroke of brilliance that Helena Wayne was at one time Robin, and then later she becomes Huntress. I think that is awesome. That's a really cool idea. Never would have thought of that. I think that's great. We also get to see the other Mr. Terrific. I don't remember what his last name is, Michael somebody, but he's the one who was introduced in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I guess he had his own series in the New 52 also. And then he comes to the Earth 2 world and meets Terry Sloan, but then we don't see what comes of that because the next time we see Terry Sloan, he's working with the World Army, which is a scene that's very similar to when Nick Fury was talking to the World Council in the Avengers movie, and they said, we're going to nuke Manhattan, and he said, no, don't do that. We have a very similar scene here, but I like Commander Khan. I think he's very interesting. We get some seeds of something, there's more than meets the eye going on with him, but we don't ever get to find out what that is. We don't find out what his backstory is. Terry Sloan is mocking him about his real father, and I don't believe that was ever revealed what was going on there. At least it wasn't in any of the stuff I've read. Maybe it is later on. But I like that guy. I like Commander Khan. I found him to be very interesting here, and I remember really liking him in some of the later volumes also. But yeah, in the first issue, I kind of got sidetracked a little bit. In the first issue, we get to see the wonders of this world fighting in a war against Apocalypse. And then that war ends with all of them dying, but then the Apocalyptian soldiers are all dead also. And then it's a little wonky just how much time has passed since that war. At first, it makes it seem like it's been 6 months since the war with Apocalypse. You got characters like The Flash acting like this war was a very recent thing, and then Alan Scott, he's doing this radio announcement or podcast announcement thing, basically saying like, we must stand strong together after this war thing. So it's acting like this war was incredibly recent, but then later on in the book we find out that this is actually 5 years after that war, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's a little weird that the Roman god of speed waited 5 years to come and give Jay his superpowers, and he does say that he was trapped in the gray, but it still seems like time is a little fluid here. At sometimes it feels like it hasn't been that long since the war ended. At other times it feels like it has been about 5 years, but that was a minor quibble. Overall, I really like this book. I think that you guys probably would as well if you are willing to give a new version of these characters a chance. And bear in mind, they are probably not going to have very much in common with the older versions of those characters, but if you keep that in mind and read this for what it is, I think you'll like it like I did. So those are my thoughts on Earth 2 Volume 1, The Gathering. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.